Imagine a tropical paradise so isolated that the rest of the world cannot hear you scream. A tiny speck of rock in the vast, unforgiving Pacific, where a historical mutiny birthed what was supposed to be a utopia. But instead of paradise, this island drowned in homemade alcohol, severed flesh, and a century-long legacy of unspeakable systemic depravity. Some places on Earth are geographically cursed. Others are cursed by the blood of the people who inhabit them. Welcome back to VerityVault, where we uncover the untold and unlock the darkest corners of human history. Today, we are opening a file that will make you question everything you thought you knew. Long before the British Empire painted the map red, Pitcairn Island was already a graveyard. In the 11th century, Polynesians navigated the treacherous seas and claimed this land. For 400 years, they thrived. They mined obsidian, traded with their neighbors on Mangariva Island 500 kilometers away, and lived in relative peace. But what happens when you are trapped on a rock and the resources run dry? When the mines emptied, the trade stopped. When the trade stopped, the hunger began. The Polynesians found themselves trapped in a beautiful cage. Desperation bred anger, and anger birthed a bloody civil war. They had nowhere to run. The ocean that once protected them was now their executioner. By the time the dust settled, the island was dead. Nature reclaimed the blood-soaked soil, and Pitcairn fell into a suffocating, centuries-long silence, waiting. Fast forward to the year 1787, the British Royal Navy vessel, the HMS Bounty, set sail under the command of Lieutenant William Bligh. Their mission? Travel to Tahiti, collect breadfruit saplings, and bring them to the Caribbean to feed the Empire's slaves. After a grueling, miserable journey, the exhausted sailors arrived in Tahiti, and what they found completely broke their minds. Two men accustomed to the brutal, maggot-infested, whip-scarred reality of the British Navy, Tahiti was heaven. The climate was perfect, food was abundant, and the local women were welcoming in ways these sailors had only ever dreamed of. For 6 intoxicating months, the crew forgot they were soldiers. They became kings of their own little world. But eventually the clock ran out. Lieutenant Bligh ordered his men back onto the wooden prison of the Bounty. They complied. But the seed of rebellion had already been planted. Could you taste heaven and willingly return to hell? For Fletcher Christian, Bligh's second-in-command, the answer was no. On April 28, 1789, the tension snapped. Christian and his followers mutinied. They dragged Commander Bligh and 18 loyalists from their beds, forced them into a tiny 23-foot rowboat, and cast them adrift in the deadly expanse of the Pacific. It was supposed to be a death sentence. The mutineers sailed back to Tahiti, straight into the arms of paradise. But Fletcher Christian wasn't stupid. He knew the British Empire would never forgive them. He knew the gallows were waiting, and he was right to be paranoid. Miraculously, against all human odds, Commander Bligh and his men rowed for 6,500 kilometers and survived. Bligh alerted the British government, and the hounds were released. Knowing the Navy was coming, Christian gathered a desperate crew to flee Tahiti forever. The manifest for this escape was a recipe for absolute disaster. 9 European mutineers, 6 Tahitian men, taken essentially as servants, and 12 Tahitian women, 27 souls in total. In 1790, they stumbled upon the forgotten silent rock of Pitcairn Island. Let's do the macabre math of this new utopia. There were 9 European men. They claimed 9 of the women as their exclusive wives. That left only 3 women to be shared among the 6 Tahitian. Men, inequality, jealousy, racial tension. In the claustrophobic isolation of Pitcairn, this wasn't just unfair, it was a lit fuse attached to a powder keg. For a fleeting moment, the island's natural bounty sustained them. But humans have a unique talent for destroying their own sanctuaries. A Scottish mutineer named William McCoy discovered how to distill a lethal, high-proof alcohol from the sweet roots of the native tea plant. As Fletcher Christian retreated into severe depression, isolating himself from the group, the island fell under the drunken, tyrannical influence of McCoy. He was no longer a sailor. He was a violent, unpredictable monster. One afternoon, McCoy flew into a blinding rage because his Tahitian wife, a woman named Tavaroa, failed to catch enough fish. His punishment? He pinned her down and sliced her ear entirely off. Driven mad by the physical torture and the psychological hell of this island, Tavaroa threw herself off a jagged cliff to her death. But McCoy didn't mourn. He simply looked at the remaining women, the ones belonging to the Tahitian men, and decided he wanted one of them. That was the spark. The Tahitian men, degraded, abused, and now threatened with losing the little they had, raided the armory. In a matter of hours, the green paradise was painted red. The slaves systematically slaughtered the European mutineers. Fletcher Christian was struck down. Others were shot or bludgeoned. When the sun rose, only 4 white men remained alive: John Adams, Ned Young, Matthew Quintal, and the monstrous William McCoy. But the bloodshed wasn't over. Did the Tahitian men liberate the women? No. They became the new tyrants, arguably treating the women worse than the Europeans did. So, the women took matters into their own hands. In the dead of night, acting with terrifying precision, the Tahitian women murdered all 6 Tahitian men in their sleep. Let's take inventory. The year is 1800. The population has been violently reduced to 4 men and 11 women. Paranoia consumed the survivors. The alcoholic McCoy, haunted by the ghosts of the island, tied a rock around his own neck and threw himself into the ocean. Matthew Quintal lost his grip on reality entirely, threatening to butcher the women and children. Fearing for their lives, the last 2 men-at-arms and Young executed Quintal with an axe. Shortly after, Young died of an asthma attack. And then there was one, John Adams, the sole surviving man on Pitcairn Island. Surrounded by a harem of 11 women and a growing generation of fatherless children, something snapped inside Adams' mind. The former mutineer and murderer found a Bible salvaged from the Bounty. He declared himself the island's patriarch, its priest, its absolute messiah. He ordered all alcohol-producing plants destroyed. He forced compulsory prayer. He began breeding a new society, fathering children, establishing a deeply religious, isolated cult where his word was literal law. When British ships finally discovered the island in 1808, they were astounded. They expected a savage colony of criminals. Instead, they found a polite, deeply devout, English-speaking Christian community led by an old, charismatic patriarch. The British were so moved by this miracle that they granted Adams amnesty. But the darkness of Pitcairn wasn't dead, it was merely hibernating in their DNA. Over the next 2 centuries, the population grew. They adopted the strict Seventh-day Adventist faith in the late 1800s. The island got internet, a magistrate, and a mayor. To the outside world, Pitcairn was a quirky historical tourist trap. But behind closed doors, the legacy of John Adams had evolved into a nightmare. In the year 2004, the British government launched Operation Unique. Police descended on Pitcairn. The island's population was only around 60 people. About 20 of them were adult men. 7 of those men were charged with a staggering 55 counts of child abuse, rape, and sexual assault. That was 1/3 of the entire male population. Among the accused, the island's mayor Steve Christina, direct descendant of the original mutineer, and the island's magistrate. They built a literal prison on the island just to house the convicted men. But the rot ran too deep. In 2010, the new mayor, Mike Warren, who, ironically campaigned on a platform of child rights, was arrested when investigators found his computer loaded with horrific child pornography. Today, the population hovers around 50 people, a dying community clinging to a rock in the middle of nowhere. Almost everyone there can trace their bloodline back to the men who slaughtered each other and the man who crowned himself a prophet. Was it the extreme isolation that fractured the human mind? Was it the lack of genetic diversity? Or is Pitcairn Island simply a mirror, reflecting what humanity truly becomes when there are no laws, no escape, and no one watching? Some secrets are meant to stay buried, but here at VerityVault, we always find the key. What do you think really happened in this case? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to dive deeper into the unknown with us, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Until next time, stay vigilant.